Camera's on.
Yep. There we go. And
looks like it says it's doing its job.
Yes.
So good morning, good afternoon, whatever it
Yes,
happens
well,
to be,
good
wherever
morning.
you are in the great wonderful.
Well, here we are in beautiful downtown Grand Bend on a fall day when it's kind of overcast, still warm. It's 55 Fahrenheit for our American friends, just over 11 degrees Celsius for the rest of the world.
We're about the same. We say 12 and cloudy, and we're in the lull of our atmospheric river, so that's kind of nice. We needed rain, and we're getting rain, but it's sure coming down in buckets. I think they said 200 millimeters on the west coast of the island over the last couple of days. So
the atmospheric river.
Yeah, they used to call it the Pineapple Express, but I think the pineapples got upset and offended by it. So,
well, we're using a different method for recording today. So if readers and listeners, can't be listeners if you're viewing this. If you're viewing this,
they got closed captioning on.
Yeah, that's true. We're testing a new system out for this particular episode because our other one is really complicated, and we're looking to streamline stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. This also allows for closed captioning. So if you don't understand what we're saying, you can hit the closed caption button and it'll come up.
Well, that's assuming that I don't mumble.
Anyway, so listen, you've been reading the news, I'm sure, or hearing the news lately about Victoria's Secret has decided to change their advertising system or their program. So obese people in skimpy lingerie isn't selling. So they decided to go back to the old version. I know you're giving this some thought.
Maybe I've been conned into this whole thing. I don't know, but is it the fact that reality is too real and we don't like that? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was very disappointed, and it might offend a few viewers to find this out, but when I was growing up, the closest you came to that kind of stuff was going to the Sears catalog, and then as you got older, then there were books like Hugh Hefner's Playboy Empire. And you know, as you move along in life, it's always a bit of a downfall. Like, there really is no Santa Claus, there is no Easter Bunny.
I'm shocked.
And most women don't have a little staple hole in the middle of their navel.
Well, I never thought ugly was a big sales pitch, you know. There's just something about selling. I mean, imagine if you were making a magazine that was an Epicurean magazine, okay, where you're displaying various recipes on a plate. And you just slop it on there and it looks like someone's already tried it.
Oh, you've seen one of my table settings, have you?
Now, you know, that just doesn't sell, okay? So it seems that we may be coming around the corner on some of the stuff that we've been sold by the 20-something merchants at the various, what's the word I'm looking for? Madison Avenue types who for whatever reason got a job selling, whether it's beer or bras. It looks like that crowd is unemployed or about to be unemployed.
Well, I guess you say, like we've talked about this before, and the issues of where are we headed to, or where are the adults in the room, and maybe a dose of reality is, not everybody's going to look like a Victoria's Secret model. You know, and maybe the adults in the room always knew that, but they wanted to give the kids a chance to play and experiment. And now that the metal's hitting the road and we're not making money, it's time to maybe stop the nonsense and get back to, what was that old Ricardo model? Fantasy Island. Yeah, that was it. Let's go back to the fantasy, where everything is going to be okay and everything is going to work out fine, and hopefully it will. But we'll do it nicely. We won't have any real reality tucked in there.
Well, our last episode, which was 29, by the way, because this is 30, season 2, episode 30. Time is really marching on here. It was, we focused on everything is broken. Like, that was our sort of focus on how come nothing works. But, the joke of this is that maybe you're right. Maybe all of a sudden common sense has broken through, or the logic of some of this experimentation, if you will, by Madison Avenue types who thought that ugly cells, or fat cells, or failure cells, or fantasy cells, which in a negative way. So maybe these things are, and obviously in the case of that company, they were losing money. And somebody went to the books and said, whoa, how come?
Coupled with that is, I wonder how many other companies are facing the same kind of issues, but maybe we're a little afraid to stand up and put that forward for fear of backlash. I'll never forget which famous author it was. News of my death has been a little premature, something along that line.
Greatly exaggerated.
So I kind of wonder if maybe common sense will say that that's the same thing, that the news of my death has perhaps not been taken properly, or common sense is maybe on a rebound, and we can only hope.
There are little tiny indicators here and there. Did you see the video that's gone viral with the Canadian opposition leader, who was interviewed by somebody actually in your neck of the woods about his position on various things, and people like Joe Rogan and Peterson and the guy over in England, Russell Brand, even the Australian broadcasting people at Sky in Australia picked up on how this particular journalist was asking questions that were open-ended based on no information at all, no facts. And Pierre Poilievre, was asking him, like, what are you talking about? For example, he said, people are saying, that you're a populist. And he says, well, what people? And the guy couldn't answer. And it went on like that. I mean, we're not going to rehash the video here, because you can see it on.
Go to the YouTube. I'm sure you'll find it there. So.
Yeah. But it's again another example of maybe, just maybe, we're turning the corner on this kind of nonsense. And I know that in his case, his whole approach is to politics is that common sense has to come back. So that's his sales pitch.
Yeah. But coupled with that, and again, what made me a little concerned was listening to some other people. And I don't know whether they are still living in fantasy land or whatever, but they're comments on this whole thing was well, this guy was kind of right, because Polyev and the conservatives are going to take back gay rights. Will have to go back in the closet and blah blah. And I can't think of anything that's farther from it. Look at it. Look at the MPs that have been elected. Look at the Conservative Party. There are gay people, black people.
Well, this guy's deputy is openly gay. Nobody cares. So what?
Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
I know,
she's
that's
not
one of the things that always comes
judged
up
upon that.
from the liberal left, if you can, and not painting any particular party, but the left-leaning individuals. And I think we've talked about that before, where something comes up and all of a sudden, well, geez, we better find something that equates this guy to Hitler or Stalin or.
Oh yeah, that's the go-to. That's the go-to meme all the time by these people who, when they run out of factual arguments, then you just throw out the emotional stuff willy-nilly. And we certainly are seeing it in the present day vis-a-vis what happened now in Israel with the terrorists attacking. It's now been 2 weeks, I guess, almost, since the October 7th. Today is the 20th. So, and the various media outlets are falling over themselves. Well, they're not terrorists. They're something else. They were looking for every possible word to describe Hamas, militants, revolutionary, you name it. I mean, and they've been called out on it. I'm sorry, and legitimately so. These people are not freedom fighters. These people are what they are. They're terrorists. And by the way, they were elected by the folks in Gaza. Back in 2006, they represent those people. If they really didn't like them, they would have tossed their butts out, but they didn't. That is who represents those civilians that are currently bearing the brunt of their leadership's folly of October 7th. Difficult to have too much sympathy for people who support that kind of leadership. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then we see these folks who are, and it was predicted just a couple of days after the atrocities in Israel that you watch, all of a sudden you're going to be demonstrations, calling for that the Palestinians are the victims and the Israelis they deserve what they got. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is.
Well, I don't know. There's a couple of things that I don't think that you want the Israelis as an enemy. Just my personal opinion. But the other side of the ugly coin is that throughout history, the Israelis now, the Jews then, have always been the go-to target for
scapegoat.
Everybody, and
right back to Shakespeare.
Or
Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
that's not to say they're always right. These,
No. Well,
you can be critical of that government,
right.
what they do, but that's a whole different issue. And what really annoys me, and I guess in a sense, we have to be careful what we say. We're not experts either, but what bothers me is there's 1,000 years of hostility that goes back to the Middle East, and the stuff that's put out by the media is so sophomoric. They're all geniuses about this. The root causes. Well, excuse me. This is not one of those 30-second explanations. You can't do that. This is far more complicated, and it has a lot of people between a rock and a hard place on solutions here. and it's been like that for a very long time. But some facts are facts, and they don't always work for the narrative of certain parties. So, for example, the thing about the hospital that allegedly was bombed by the Israelis, turns out it wasn't bombed by them; it was an errant rocket by the Palestinian. It wasn't even Hamas. It was the other bunch there that's doing the shooting off of these rather crude rockets, and it went up and came down. Fortunately, it came down at a parking lot beside the hospital, but it didn't. No hospital was blown up. They've shown the videos, and there's still not 3 days after. There's still people who claim that 500 people were killed and the hospital's gone, in spite of absolute evidence to the contrary. That doesn't make it a good or bad. It just that's a fact. And even the Prime Minister of Canada can't make up his mind whether, based on intelligence provided to him by his friend in Washington, here's the video. No, well, I have to think about that. We need more investigation. What are you talking about?
Well, I think part of that comes from the fact is that he stood up and condemned the attack right away, and he didn't wait for any proper intelligence. But
he and a whole bunch of other people too. I mean, that doesn't absolve him of being
no.
Not with it at the time.
I guess part of this goes back in over the last decade anyway of the phrase that's been coined, fake news. Well, I think for John Q. Public, and I guess that's where I fall most of the time. It's very difficult to try and find out what is factual and what is not, what is made up. You know as well as I do what they can do with computer graphics now and animation.
Oh yeah.
But someday you could look at people might think that we're not really real. We're just computer generated graphic things of talking heads. I mean, I don't know where. It's like politicians. We've lost respect. We've lost trust in politicians, and it's getting the same way with media. They just don't seem to cover the things, and what they do cover, you could pick up on any particular broadcast, and they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think the media has been just as infected with the Victoria's Secret kind of journalism, where it's a lot of amateurs in the sense of they're not really journalists. They're just looking for sensationalism, or they don't actually do real journalism, that is to interview people and fact check and whatever. And even the fact checking now is politicized, because if you fact check with one organization that has a particular political bent, it sees an actual fact differently. And there's a lot of really poorly educated folks in the sense of especially in the international arena, where they put out facts onto YouTube, broadly speaking, or through even legacy media. And if you know anything about history, you go, what are you talking about? It's complete and utter rubbish. And then even if it's wrong, and there has to be a retraction, well, it'll be some minor thing, in
buried on page 9.
Yeah, buried on page, yeah, exactly, or 39C next to the grocery ads. So in the print media, but certainly in the video media, legacy and otherwise, the people have the attention span of a goldfish, because they forget what they saw, or if they saw something that really is outrageous and probably, or I should say, done by AI, you can't unsee that, because even though it never happened, people believe it happened. I mean you can, Hollywood movies today can show things that are so ostensibly real, but it's not. It's CGI. And so what is likely to happen, or has already happened, is the same thing in in news media. Now, the interesting thing I find in the last 2 weeks with respect to the crisis in the Middle East is that we have lots of people putting in lots of time with videos and whatever showing that 24/7. Okay, there's a lot of reporting on it, and of course, depending on your media source, you get one side or the other. But really saturated. The media is saturated on it. Yet for almost 2 years, there's been a war going on in Ukraine, and there's practically no reporting on any on-site stuff. It's either whatever the Ukrainian Defense Department puts out is what you get to see, or whatever the Russians put out is what you get to see. But there's never been any on-the-scene reporting of the battles or whatever that we're getting with respect to the Hamas-Israel conflict. So, and plus the whole thing with Russia, as we were talking in pre-production, that that is to conflate the Ukrainian-Russian conflict with the Hamas-Israel terror attack. There are two totally different issues here. And it drives me crazy when I have to listen to these nincompoops talk about these things as if they're the same. They're not the same. These are, in the case of Ukraine and Russia, these are two states. These are not two terrorist entities. These are two states that have a disagreement. Whether you like it or not, they're going head to head on it. And by the way, what started it is not the same as what Hamas is doing. There are 8 million ethnic Russians in the Ukraine that have been essentially hard done by nationalist Ukrainians, and who came to the rescue was Mother Russia, whether you like that or not. Okay, it's no different than when the American president stands up and says not a single hair on an American will be touched without the Seventh Fleet showing up and dealing with it. So the hypocrisy is amazing. But the business there has very little to do with the business that's going on in Israel. That's a terrorist attack on a country and a people, and they are fighting back, and good for them. How it turns out at the end is we're all going to have to deal with that. But to conflate the two, and to talk about it in the same context is tragically wrong.
Well,
especially when
wrong,
people are talking about World War III about this.
I think it's also part and parcel the way that the news medias have been brought up. We got two wars going on. Well, no, we don't really, but they're conflicts. And
and plus we're talking about
different types, but
from the Western perspective, it's not none of them has actually any boots on the ground. This is the part that is also very disingenuous. We've had people talk about there's a two-front war going. What? There's been no war declared. There's no NATO countries involved in this war. There's a proxy war in this. Yeah, with the NATO countries are sending weapons to the Ukrainians. But there's no boots on the ground. There's no call up. We haven't declared war on Russia or vice versa. This is absolute nonsense. But they've got people worked up into a tizzy here on this, and then they try to add in, we got the axis of evil. I'll tell you who's evil: the Iranians, the Hezbollah, and the Hamas people. Clear about what their intentions are, and that is to kill Jews. In the other conflict, there's never any talk about that. Okay, this is not the same thing. And by the way, to also add in that axis includes China, this is a bridge too far now. This is really getting to be very difficult to grasp, but by ordinary folks here. Like, we have no trouble filling our Walmart stores with stuff from China, but at the same time we want to go to war with them. Like, how does this jive? Yeah.
Well, it goes back, right, after the First World War ended and things were along rosy and pretty good, and then came the 30s and people were unemployed and jobs are hard to find, and we had dust bowls and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of quite magically, the Second World War came along to build up munitions and employ people. And oh yeah, we're going to lose a bunch of people through deaths and etc. But the economy will pick up. And it's the same thing. After the Second World War, the economy rolled along, everything was fine and rosy, and then all of a sudden we had Korean conflict. And then we've had a Vietnam conflict. And now, maybe it's just me and maybe I'm being a little paranoid about that, but you got to worry if the economy goes down, and the only way that we're going to get out of this is to send young men and women off to get slaughtered. There's something wrong with that picture. But
moreover, this is not 1941. This is 2023, where your adversary, if you want to start picking adversaries, has the same amount of killing power as you do. So nobody wins on this one. This is not the, and for those folks who might want to go to their public library and pick up a history book, the Japanese were sanctioned 6 ways to midnight in the late 30s, which is by the U.S. No oil, no steel, no nothing. And these people at the time saw these sanctions as crippling their economies, which is what gave rise to the militaristic movements in Japan in the late 30s, because they basically saw them as these sanctions that were imposed on it as being anti-Japanese, and the only way they could at the time, see out of that mess was to roll the dice and see if they could defeat the U.S. Okay, now that was clearly not a good idea in the end, but you could see how that started off. But again, go read your history and how that happened. And remember, the Second World War began in September 1939. The U.S. did not enter the war until December 7th, 1941, after the Japanese had basically rolled the dice with Pearl Harbor. And there was no war declared on Germany. It was Germany that declared war on the U.S. because of its deal with Japan and Italy. So these things have a way of unraveling really quickly. And there are people who have said that we live in the same kind of times today as we did after or before the First World War broke out, where we had all these alliances and various groups that, and of course it had a lot to do with royalty and stuff like that back then. But when they popped off the Archduke in Sarajevo, it set in motion a whole bunch of contractual obligations, if you will, between various actors that started the war. No one was really thinking about war until that August 2014, where some lunatic shoots this guy dead in Sarajevo and sets off a whole chain of events. So we have to be careful that we're not sleepwalking into a similar situation today, which is why you have to ask the questions that even mere mortals like you and I put up, like, excuse me, but what are we doing here? Especially in view of the fact that we could all be dead, okay? Because there's 7 countries in the world now that have nuclear weapons.
And there's probably a few more that aren't really.
That they're not telling us about. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. But it goes back to the same thing. It sounds like a pub night that we're going through here. We're solving all the problems of the world, but 1, nobody's listening, and 2, we forgot to take minutes, so nothing is ever going to get recorded.
Well, we're recorded.
Well, we are now, yeah.
We've gone on record.
Yeah.
We're just ordinary folks who talking over the fence and saying, this nonsense has to stop. Common sense has to come back, and we have to think about humanity.
And whether it's over a fence or over a table full of food or whatever, and it would be nice to have the different players all sitting down and you know, a kumbaya kind of moment, right? It's just, I don't care
Well,
if you're left, right, center. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care what your religion is. Can't we all just have a really nice meal and forget about this nonsense? You know?
well, it requires you, as we started off, some changes are occurring. Maybe some adults have showed up and said,
You know,
"Okay, kids,
our
stop playing
fingers
with
crossed on that
matches, you know, because you're going to set the place on fire. We're going to stop this." And Grandpa, all the old guys who are like to play war right now, you got to go retire, do something else. No names mentioned here, but we got too many octogenarians running around the world who are basically out of touch with reality here.
And maybe not all octogenarians. We got quite a few people that are out of touch with reality, I think. But
yeah, well, I just said there are a bunch of them, not all of them, a bunch of them. I'll let folks listening or watching check the boxes off with the names on who they are.
Yeah,
but we have to think positively, you know. And,
that's right. Yeah, and you know, I guess the positive note to come out of today's broadcast will be maybe the adults are starting to move from the back of the room to come to the front, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that that's the case.
And ask the questions and demand answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we've talked about that before. Was that John quiet public or was it John questioning public? And I'm kind of hoping that John questioning is coming into realm.
Let's be positive and think that's actually happening, and let's hope for a rather quick resolution of the Middle East thing, and let's hope that sane thinkers are in charge and not the warmongers, because we will all lose with them. That's not to say that there's got to be justice in that. People have to be held to book on what happened on October 7th. Sorry for war is not a we can be cavalier about it when you're 8,000 miles away. All lives are important. But this is going to be a situation that will be resolved between those two parties one way or the other. And once it's done, that's when you can start talking about how we support moving forward. But this will have to run its course, because it's not I don't know how you can do it any other way.
I guess kind of to wrap it all up, yesterday here in the province of British Columbia, we had our natural disaster emergency preparedness awareness campaign day. And I guess what I'm taking out of this is that there's a lot of terrible things going on in the world, what humans are doing to humans, but Mother Nature is a great equalizer. How many earthquakes have there been? How many volcanoes have blown up? I mean, how many natural things are going on? And I guess if we want to do something and do something properly, maybe we should be looking at getting ourselves with an emergency preparedness kit to, it used to be 72 hours. I don't know what it is now. And get yourself ready for these kinds of things. And maybe that'll take your mind off all the atrocities and horrible things that are going on, to get yourself ready.
Yeah. And remember who your friends are. And remember who your neighbors are. And keep them close, because when tough times come, you'll need that. At the same time, I think we have to be optimistic that we can turn this around collectively as a society. and better days are coming. So that's a positive thing. Anyway.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. We're fast approaching the longest or the shortest day of the year, so we know it's going to get better.
Indeed. All right. Well, with that, I will say adios to our viewers. Don't forget to click the button down there that's you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Comments welcome. Don't forget to subscribe. The audio version is available on Spotify and other podcast platforms, and the video version on YouTube and Rumble. So until we meet again.
Yes, as they say.
Happy trails to you.
Now,
That's all I know. I don't want to sing anymore because it will be banned.
Maybe.
All right, Bob. See you soon.
You bet. Have fun.